Good evening and welcome this Sunday evening to a series of critical conversations that we are having around health and development uh, in a partnership opportunity with Scroll, Survivors Against TB, and PI. Today we are going to be talking about nutrition and food in times when the world is facing an unprecedented crisis. The truth is that our relationship with food has changed during this pandemic, ever since this pandemic started all over the world. We are currently struggling with numerous ideas around food. Trapped in our homes, forced to turn inwards, we are looking at food as both a fuel for our sustenance and our nourishment, but also for many people, um, a way to fight this pandemic and to also manage other diseases and comorbidities that they already have. The reason we decided on this particular issue is that many of you have reached out to us and said that you would like us to focus on nutrition, food, hunger, and other such issues. One of the critical things that when we talk about food today, at least in India, is that even as we consider food as a fuel and as a way to sustain ourselves, there are thousands who do not have access, in fact, millions who do not have access to food, who do not have access to enough nutrition. So there is a dichotomy here where we are turning inwards and sustaining ourselves through food, and at the same time, we are sort of inundated with images and reporting and writing around how so many people lack access to it. So today's conversation is about understanding food in times of this pandemic, both having it, having the right kind of food, but also understanding where we are situated in context of millions who do not have access to food. This is very important for us. Today, food has become like a life source, but also a source of dividing us, a source of making us realize the difference between privilege and lack of access. Keeping all of those issues in mind, this conversation we hope will be interesting and engaging for you. We will be accepting live questions, so on our Twitter, on our Facebook, on our YouTube, please feel free to reach out to us and ask us your questions. No question is irrelevant. We will also try to make this conversation bilingual. So हम ये बातचीत हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों में करने की कोशिश करेंगे ताकि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोगों को इस बातचीत से लाभ मिले और आप लोग जो भी अपने सवाल पूछना चाहते हैं, चाहे वो हिंदी में हो या अंग्रेजी में हो, तो हमसे ज़रूर पूछिए हमारे सोशल मीडिया हैंडल्स से। और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट बात ये है, सबसे ज़रूरी बात ये है कि हम दोनों तरीके के जवाब देने की कोशिश करेंगे, हिंदी में भी देने की कोशिश करेंगे, अंग्रेजी में भी देने की कोशिश करेंगे। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं ये बातचीत हमारे खान पीन के बारे में। और इस वक्त जबकि ये महामारी सारी दुनिया में फैल रही है, हमारा इस खान पीन से क्या रिश्ता है और ये हमारे जीवन पे क्या असर कर रहा है। बट सबसे पहले मैं अपने गेस्ट से आपको मिलाना चाहूँगा, जो एक वेल नोन यंग न्यूट्रिशनिस्ट हैं, जो महाराष्ट्र में बेस्ड हैं, जहाँ पर काफ़ी बड़ा COVID-19 की शुरुआत के सबसे बड़े केस लोड्स को हमने देखा था. So we are going to be introducing you to Raksha, who is a young nutritionist, a sports nutritionist who has worked across communities and also is trying to weigh in with her expertise and her knowledge about how do we deal with food at this time. So welcome, Raksha. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday evening.
Thank you, Chapal.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. I had this little prelude, which was a little long, but let's just, how has food changed in our lives, the importance of food, right? Because what we eat and what we don't eat and what we had access to has all changed in this pandemic. We have restricted means and we are all trying to understand how food must be understood. So you work with this, right, on an ongoing basis. You tell people what to eat, what not to eat. You tell them what is good for them. In times of this pandemic, what does food mean to us? खान पीन का क्या मतलब है हमारे जीवन में?
Thanks for your question, Chapal. So I think you mentioned it perfectly that there are two ways of looking at it. एक है जहाँ पे लोग survive करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, जिनको बस वो 2 बार भी मील मिल जाए दिन का, so it can act like a shield, it can act like a nutritional equipment or a backing, so that they can keep living and not fall down on their nutrient profiles. Whereas some others, they're mostly taking culinary adventures, making shortbreads and banana breads at home. So if you see, this is actually called the double burden of malnourishment, where there is either excess and then obesity, or where there is malnourishment and people have no food, and hence there's no survival. So I think pandemic ke time pe, what's come to the surface is that while people are losing jobs, while people probably, if they've not saved, or the ones who were actually hand to mouth, that is दिन का जितना भी पैसा आता है वो राशन पे चला जाता है, खाने पे चला जाता है, for them the entire concept of survival, that shield, is completely lost. Because from where are these people going to get adequate nutrients when it comes to proteins in order to take care of their muscle mass, so that if they ever fall somewhere they shouldn't hurt themselves. Any other nutrients like B12, vitamin D3, to keep their immunity intact, especially at a time of vulnerability like this, when any kind of an exposure can actually challenge your survival. So definitely I think today we're going to be covering so much about optimizing even inexpensive sources of foods which can help these people back themselves nutritionally, so that they're not falling prey to the current pandemic, and at least surviving and going through this easily. I think another very important aspect would be the perishability, right? Because there that further funnels down the availability of foods. So things like milk and dahi, etc., whatever were available to these people as a one pot meal or as an instant meal, is also now gone out. So the constant survival is again challenged, because you need gas, you need salt, you need oil in order to be able to cook a dal khichdi also, for that matter. So I think the pandemic has brought to the surface that there are these two segments. The world is divided into two halves, where there is either like culinary adventures, like I said, is happening, or even survival is challenged. So definitely immunity is something that we'll probably put some more light on for people who are struggling to eat even 2 square meals.
I mean, I want to take आपकी जो बातें हैं, I want to take it a little further. उसको थोड़ा आगे ले जाते हैं. There is a division, right? And you've said there are not just two Indias, there are two worlds in a way. कि विश्व ही दो हिस्सों में बट रहा है एक तरह से. When I look at India, what is the impact you think this is going to have on us as a country? You were talking about कैसे लोग हैं जिनको 2 meals नहीं मिल रही हैं दिन की. तो अब उन पे क्या impact है? I mean, हमारे society पे, हमारे देश पे क्या impact है? What is the impact we are looking at?
I think if I had to put it in a few words, it would be collapse of the human infrastructure, right? Because India is the country of labor. And if there's no energy in the laborer's body, how are they going to function? If there is no protein going into the laborer's body, how are they going to recover when they go to sleep and turn up to work the next day, even when things resume back? So I think one of the nutrients that is really getting affected is their iron levels. Definitely you have, so let's take certain segments. If you take the male population, the laborer population, they were used to having a good mountain of rice with a little bit of dal on it, and that would take care of them. Probably a banana in the evening. All of these are energy sources. You notice that these are not these aren't sources that are expensive. They are just sources that would give them energy so that they can carry out their duties and do it well and not go through wear and tear. If you look at the young women population, their menses, so if you've heard of PCOD, it is happening in a lean population. They do not get their monthly cycle or their monthly period simply because their iron levels are again low. Their proteins that they're consuming are low. If we look at children, you'll mostly see that their hair color is mostly different and it's more magenta. If you see their growth, it's usually stunted. And even their legs, if you see, a lot of them have deficiency of vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, which further takes away how they're growing up. So each and every segment of the laborer population is going through a physical, a mental, a recovery challenge. And this is the collapse of India's manual structure, the laborer population, which is really the foundation of us, isn't it? I mean, if you can see other countries and they're more mechanized. Here, okay, so even cattle abroad is probably put into a factory unit and it's milked. But here you have the milkman doing it. And if you see every sector, you need a lot of nutrients going into these people's bodies, whether that's zinc, whether that's vitamin B12, whether that's having a good gut in order to be able to produce that B12 and vitamin D3 if it's not available to them. Ensuring their security when they're moving from a city to another city for work, making sure that again their vulnerability is reduced, making sure that they don't fall ill just because the water of a place is different from what they've now consumed. I think all of these things are really important to take care of how India is going to cope up in the future with this global pandemic.
So you mentioned a lot of good points. I want to pick on something, a broader question that we are often asked. I mean, ये तो बहुत अच्छी बातें हैं, like they're all relevant. But आप मुझे ये बताइए, if a family of 3 or 4, 4 लोगों का परिवार है, उनके पास सिर्फ 1000 रुपया है. I'm asking you this fundamental question because people get asked these questions all the time. अरे भैया 500 या 1000 रुपए ही बनते हैं हमारे इस पैंडेमिक में बड़ी मुश्किल से. What are the nutritional sources for them? वो क्या खाएं? Because I mean today it's not just about informal labor. सिर्फ उनके लिए नहीं है जो labor force में हैं, जो informal काम कर economy में हैं. मगर आप देखिए इस वक्त across the board salary cuts हो गए हैं, retrenchments हो गए हैं. हम रोज सुनते हैं इस कंपनी ने इतने लोगों को निकाल दिया, इस कंपनी में इतने लोगों को निकाल दिया. अगर आपके पास और सबसे पहले वो जाते हैं जो सपोर्ट स्टाफ होते हैं, they are the first to go and the families are dependent on them, sometimes more than one family is dependent on them. तो फिर अगर आपको मैं कहूँ आपके पास 1000 रुपए का बजट है, रक्षा, आप क्या बोलेंगे उनसे? क्या खाइए, क्या खाना चाहिए उनको?
Chapal, if I had to select very few things, it would, and to fit the budget of 1000 rupees, जैसे आप कह रहे हैं कि a family of 4, there are things that they can optimize from by selecting foods that pair together to give them complete energy and complete proteins. यानी कि वो उस फॉर्म में बॉडी को अवेलेबल या बायो अवेलेबल जिसे कहते हैं, वो उस वे में बॉडी को अवेलेबल होता है कि बॉडी इजिली एब्जॉर्ब कर सकती है और स्ट्रगल नहीं करना पड़ता है. एंड वी ऑल्सो हैव अ लॉट ऑफ ट्रेडिशनल वेज ऑफ फर्दर ऑप्टिमाइजिंग दीज थिंग्स. आई विल गिव यू फ्यू एग्जांपल्स. आई थिंक आई एम गोइंग टू मेंशन दाल, राइस, मूंग, peanuts, aloo, and I'll tell you why all of these things. Let's take moong for example. It's a complete meal on its own, and India has a tradition of sprouting moong overnight. So उसको हम सोख करके रखते हैं पानी में, उसके एंटी न्यूट्रिएंट्स कम हो जाते हैं, बायो अवेलेबिलिटी इंप्रूव हो जाता है, एंड फर्दर जब उसके स्प्राउट्स निकलते हैं वो जिंक में और ज्यादा बेहतरीन हो जाता है. So definitely if you hear right now विटामिन सी खाओ, जिंक खाओ, विटामिन D3 लीजिए, ये जो पूरी कॉन्वर्सेशन हो रही है, हमें इनके लिए सप्लीमेंट्स के ऊपर कुछ देखना पड़ेगा. And that is if they will stick to doing things that are traditionally followed as preparation, or for that matter even foods that are paired together correctly in the right proportion, they're going to get a lot of nutrients. Another example besides moong would be dal and rice together, also having it in the 3:1 proportion. Chawal, inexpensive. दाल थोड़ा उससे ज्यादा एक्सपेंसिव, लेकिन जब भी हम उसको कुक करते हैं एंड एग्जैक्टली 3:1 के प्रोपोर्शन में खाते हैं, तो हमारी बॉडी हमें उतना BCAA एंड बाकी के 6 अमाइनो एसिड्स ऐसे प्रोवाइड करती है कि वो टोटल 9 अमाइनो एसिड्स का जो प्रोफाइल बनता है वो हमारी बॉडी अपटेक कर सकती है एज प्रोटीन एंड रिकवरी दे सकती है पूरी रात। एट द सेम टाइम उनके न्यूट्रिएंट्स इतने अलाइंड है कि दिमाग को भी शांति मिलती है, डाइजेशन को भी शांति मिलती है, बिकॉज इट्स अ स्टार्च सोर्स, and right now as we are seeing, mental health is also affected. So this is a kind of a one pot meal that is really helpful for people who have to optimize nutrition and get enough energy, starch, protein to take care of their mental and physical health, along with nutrients like zinc, complete amino acid profiles, vitamin B6 and magnesium from peanuts. This is also another thing that is a serotonin boost, which will help convert serotonin. And that is a feel good hormone, which is very, very important today to keep people's stability. Besides that, the last one, aloo. I think a lot of our textbooks don't mention this, but जब हमारे sailors पुराने जमाने में सी जाते थे और बहुत बहुत टाइम तक उनको फ्रेश फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स जिसमें से विटामिन सी मिल सकता है, जैसे ऑरेंज है, बाहर के देशों में कीवी है, वो नहीं मिलता, तो ये नॉन पेरिशेबल आलू में से उन्हें इतना विटामिन सी मिलता था कि विटामिन सी डेफिशिएंसी स्कर्वी जो होती है वो उसको भी रिजॉल्व करता था. सो आलू इज दैट ब्यूटिफुल अ सोर्स. इसके लिए वो विटामिन सी जब भी पोहे के साथ फॉर एग्जांपल हम बनाते हैं, विटामिन सी can take up iron from poha really beautifully, and iske liye you'll also see as a source of energy. A lot of laborers can also do just poha, boiled aloo, kala namak and maybe a spoon of dahi to make it a complete meal, and it's quite inexpensive. It's about poha comes at about 50 rupees for a kilo.
I want to take this side because I think this is really important. आपने कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा बात हो रही है, सारे डॉक्टर्स कहते हैं आप जिंक ज़रूर लीजिए, विटामिन सी ज़रूर लीजिए, मैग्नीशियम ज़रूर लीजिए, बट ये तो सप्लीमेंट्स में आते हैं. These are all supplements that we are told to buy, but ordinary people can't afford these supplements with the wage cuts that they are having and the unemployment that they are having. तो हम किसी को बोलें भाई ज़रूर खाओ, जिंक ज़रूर खा लो और मैग्नीशियम ज़रूर लो और विटामिन सी खूब मात्रा में लो, तो उसमें ऑरेंज चाहिए, नींबू चाहिए, ये सब महंगा है. तो आप 2-3 फूड्स बताइए इन सब के लिए, बिकॉज़ आई थिंक दिस इज़ रियली क्रिटिकल, बिकॉज़ हम एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि लोगों को हम ये एडवाइस तो दे दें, मगर हम उनका कभी बजट नहीं देखते. We don't really ask them about their budget. We just make these suggestions which are really quite expensive.
You're right, Chapal. Absolutely. I think when we're looking at vitamin C, my first and the most important source will be potato, including it as a sabzi on the side of the meal. Non-perishable, so it can be stored for long as well. And if you notice कि हमेशा potato की सब्जी में एक turmeric and rye का तड़का पड़ता है, that further boosts the immunity because they're anti-inflammatory sources as well. Curcumin is extremely important from turmeric for that. So that's one thing for vitamin C. The second for vitamin C, I would definitely say amla. All across the year, it's pretty much available. 3 rupees का एक आमला आता है. एंड फर्दर अगर उसको खाली स्पाइसेस के साथ हम फर्मेंट करके रखें, उसका प्रोबायोटिक वैल्यू इंप्रूव होगा, एंड दैट इज एक्सट्रीमली गुड फॉर द गट और द इंटेस्टाइन ऑफ द लेबरर्स who have to move from the northern India region to different parts of India for work, and वो कहीं और पे जाके जब भी वहाँ की मिट्टी का खाना खाते हैं, जब वहाँ का क्लाइमेट उनको अडेप्ट करना होता है या पानी से अडेप्ट करना होता है, that is exactly the good gut bacteria that takes care of their immunity, and immunity is only made in your gut, and that's it. That's the second thing. I think the third thing would be nimbu. Simply adding nimbu to water and probably adding a spoon of sattu, which is channe ka powder. Channa is also pretty much just about 15 rupees for 100 grams. So usko grind karke एक spoon channe ka powder, नींबू, नमक डाल के gives you energy, amino acids, vitamin C, lovely recovery drink. So I think that would be for vitamin C. Coming to zinc, lentils, all of them, and peanuts, very important. Since we're looking at inexpensive sources, I'm not going to get into other nuts and seeds that could provide you the same. But I think कि इतनी sustainability है हमारे laborers में कि वो अगर जैकफ्रूट की सब्जी खाते हैं, कटर की सब्जी, तो उसके सीड्स को लेके उसको रोस्ट करके भी वो सीड्स भी खाते हैं, and that is a very good source of zinc. So, sprouting your lentils, having a lentil and cereal combination that is more like chole chawal हुए, rajma chawal, उड़द and चावल हुआ, झुमका भाकर,
Mhm.
ये सब चीजें बहुत important है. Peanuts, natural source of vitamin B6 and magnesium, so works beautifully. Another important thing that I'd like to say is the vitamin D3 aspect. I think getting out in the sun, like even right now, just probably getting some sun from how much ever area you feel is safe to step into is extremely important, because we're not getting enough from food. I think everyone has their restrictions during the pandemic. के पता नहीं हमें कितना नॉनवेज खाना है या eggs खाने हैं. So अगर वो आपको खाना नहीं है, you have to keep a good fatty acid profile in your food to get into your body to be able to absorb the fat soluble vitamin D3. So that can come easily via peanuts again.
So I thank you so much, because I think this is all very useful, because these are inexpensive sources and we have to look at how to optimize them, because actually we are losing a lot of our local food, right? Because a lot of what you have mentioned, sattu की आपने बात की, peanuts की आप बार बार बात कर रही हैं, जो कि बहुत सस्ते होते हैं, आलू की जो आप बात कर रही हैं, जो शायद ज़्यादातर लोग खरीद के खा सकते हैं, या
Right.
बना सकते हैं. तो ये these are all very important sources and very important issues. Now I want to take a few live questions, because we've already started getting a lot of live questions, and I want to say कि अगर आपके सवाल हैं तो please ask them from us. We'll make sure that we try and address as many of them as possible. The number one thing has been that children are are a high risk population in a sense, and somebody has asked that there's no proper exercise for children during this lockdown. We are all trapped. We have small homes. छोटे घर हैं, बाहर जाना मुश्किल है. अब तो बगल वालों के घर में कभी कोविड होता है, कहीं किसी पे होता है. तो हम सब, the best thing is to actually guard yourself. How do we? What is the diet for children? Because that is something, we are primarily a young country. ज़्यादातर हिंदुस्तान में जो लोग हैं वो डेमोग्राफिकली अपनी पॉपुलेशन में यंग हैं. बच्चों के लिए आप क्या कहेंगे?
Thanks, Chapal. So I think for kids, very importantly, we're going to look at sources which are good with iron, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, so that उनकी growth अच्छी रहे. Plus, of course, उनका जो physical activity, sports, exercise, movement है, वो भी बहुत restrict हो चुका है. So we have to take care of a lovely amino acid profile, so उनका muscle breakdown ना हो. I think few foods that I would recommend is one. Again, I'm going to look at all sources which are easily available and inexpensive. Rajgira laddu, it is about 5 rupees a laddu. So a beautiful source. Amaranth, a lovely source of iron, calcium, lots of B vitamins. It and that mixed with jaggery becomes a lovely source and a power bomb for kids to keep up their energy levels. The second that I would say is ragi sattva, which is mainly ragi flour, inexpensive again, mixed with very little milk and sugar. Sugar could be cane sugar or jaggery. Again, very inexpensive, easily available. Just a 3-ingredient pot meal. Very good to ensure that they're not falling prey to the pandemic. And another very important thing that I would say is a glass of milk, if that is affordable. I think it's a complete meal, lovely protein profile, enough energy to take care of the kids' recovery process across the night when they get into an NREM stage 4 sleep, when their recovery mechanism is intact. I think besides that, if there is any kind of fermented food that can be added, maybe making a 3:1 combination to give them an idli or dosa would be lovely, because it is these probiotic meals that take care of the gut lining of their intestine, which is still developing. And the life of the gut lining is only to keep producing blood cells, which act as soldiers and take care of your immunity, and they're constantly talking with all the bacteria on the outside of the body. So maintaining that gut health with fermented foods. If there are certain children who would like to do घर का बना हुआ aloo papad or ragi papad, which is again very inexpensive. It would take care of their vitamin C, vitamin A, and their probiotic requirements.
Now, let me ask you, thanks for this, but let me ask you another question. A lot of people talk about fresh vegetables and fresh fruits, right? And the truth is, they are the most expensive thing. कौन सा laborer inexpensive, I mean, सस्ते fruits उसको कहाँ से मिलेंगे? और because most poor people are struggling to buy this. This is something Swagata has asked here. Um, if you can suggest how important they are and if they can be replaced. I mean, इनकी कोई replacement है? क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ तो ये सारे वक्त कहते हैं fresh fruit खाओ, fresh vegetables खाओ, मगर इस pandemic में कहाँ कोई afford कर सकता है?
Thank you. I think this is a lovely question because I feel every blog on the internet or any recommendations that are constantly being given will only give you very vague statements like eat whole grains, eat more legumes, have more fresh fruits and vegetables, which I feel is really incorrect because you are just copy pasting something that someone sitting really far away from you in some other nation is trying to point out and is recommending to their audience. But we're here, we're Indians. Our food is supposed to be mainly carb and lentil based at breakfast. So if you see poha with peanuts, if you'll see it's idli dosa, if you will see it's paratha, aloo ka paratha, dahi or pickle, there is no vegetable involved in it. But nowadays, people feel it's important to keep fortifying lots of fruits and vegetables. Have it at breakfast. Add more vegetables to your poha at the, at such level where people can see more vegetables and barely any poha in their, in their plate. It's a very wrong guideline. Sabzi was always supposed to be had in a small vati, or it was supposed to be taken as two spoons on the side of your plate. It is not the hero of the movie. It is only the side role player or the side band player of your plate. And it is just that much that you were supposed to consume because you're an Indian. You'll
I
get
can't believe that. I have to stop you. You have to say this again because everywhere in the media, we're just hearing sabzi sabzi fal. And, it's kind of ironic because when you look at poor people and you say, अरे भाई और सब्जी खाओ और फल खाओ तो वो कहते हैं आप दे रहे हो क्या जो हम खाएं मतलब कि you're saying that this is not that critical in our diet in our old dietary patterns.
Chapal, if you see so many people who want to constantly have tons of vegetables and then take very little dal and rice on the side and things like that, they're aiming and aspiring for a six-pack ab. But where is the six-pack ab? It's with the laborer. Why? They eat a mountain of rice with dal, little bit of dal, and that's
Yeah.
it. They do not consume anything that is fairly very, very vegetable or fruit based. The maximum fruit a laborer is going to have is a banana because it's hygiene and appeal. It's easy to just eat on the spot and get done with it. It's quite inexpensive. It's 3 rupees for 3 or 4 rupees for a banana, easily and locally available everywhere, mostly in India, especially on the coastal belt. Um, and I think that besides the banana and probably the coconut, which is not a fruit, but a coconut, a grated coconut on their sambar or on their dal. I don't see any other vegetable particularly or any fruit particularly that they will consume. Vegetable will just be a small little side of sabzi with their lunch, and that's about it. At dinner is a simple meal of dal and rice because one, it takes care of the time that you need to cook the sabzi, of the cutting efforts, etc. Because if you've seen in the village or the rural areas, there was no light or electricity initially. So what was their pattern of eating? It was just soaking rice and dal, putting it, letting it boil with some turmeric and salt. It's done, and that was their meal. They didn't have electricity to chop food, cook it, put spices to it. No, there will be no sabzi in any rural area even today. They are the fittest people you will see. It's because what people don't realize is that your car runs on fuel, and that fuel is energy that comes from carbohydrates and proteins and some amount of fat added to it if you can afford it. Besides that, fruits and vegetables were supposed to be eaten. Like I said, they are just the side role players and not the hero. So just having about one serving of a banana a day, maybe alternate days, is all right. And all your vitamin C antioxidants are beautifully available in the regular vegetables that they will have, even 2 spoons of it. Because even if you see, Chapal, if you've been on a culinary escapade, there will be 2 juris of palak, which will probably give you this much sabzi. So imagine someone who's eating this much sabzi on their plate is consuming entire 2 juris of palak, because we have a tradition of cooking sabzis and improving its bioavailability of nutrients with spices like turmeric, pepper, amchur powder, and some oil like mustard oils, etc., which further takes care of our gut lining and immunity.
So you spoke about gut lining, and I think we have a very appropriate question here from the Northeast. I mean, I don't know why they've said from the Northeast. Uh, okay, it says, okay, Kange Loin has asked. Thank you, Kange, for asking this question, because ये बहुत ज़रूरी है कि हम समझें कि हिंदुस्तान में अलग अलग तरह के खाने बनते हैं, और वो इसलिए बनते हैं क्योंकि अलग जगह अलग चीज़ें अवेलेबल होती हैं. तो she's saying this lovely thing. She's saying here in the northeast part of India, we take bamboo shoot and beans by making them, by fermenting them, I guess. Is it good to ferment food rather than curd, yogurt, kefir, which is not easily available here? And I think underlying that question is also, which is also expensive, right? कि हर जना दूध नहीं खरीद सकता और हर जना दही नहीं बना सकता. तो फर्मेंटेड फूड्स के बारे में जो ये कह रही हैं, इसके बारे में आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
Definitely. I think this is going to become a nutritional statement tomorrow, where they will be like, oh, have fermented bamboo shoot. Because definitely you have a climate which is going to take care of how bamboo shoot as well as beans are going to ferment. When I went to the north, they would have chicken achar, which was very new to me. So
Yeah.
I think you have to take things that are locally available to you, put it through a perfect concoction of oil and spices that are recommended in quantities and types, and you are supposed to ferment that for 2 or 4 days depending upon what the recipe suggests, and consume that, versus following a narrative that somewhere someone in South India is doing, because it otherwise becomes the same series, right? It's like today everyone in the West is having avocados, so we're having avocados. So it becomes the same thing. If you're going to try and do dahi and yogurt, etc., as fermented sources, it's a part of the North Indian, the whole Delhi side, as well as the South Indian culture. So I think definitely, please go ahead. And this sounds very interesting. You should definitely do
Yeah.
your bamboo shoot and beans.
So you talk
The
very
beautiful thing with beans is also that any of your lentils and beans, whenever a farmer is growing lentils, pulses, dals, beans, there is nitrogen fixation that's happening. So if we want to optimize what that family of four is going to get in 1,000 rupees next year, we have to ensure that once we demand for more things that are local, lentil based, the farmer is going to have a better cropping cycle the next year, and probably you will be able to optimize more amount of food at the same rate the coming years. We have to be very progressive and futuristic. Local foods are future foods.
So we have another set of questions, and I should get you to quickly address them. But before I do, very briefly, I want you to respond to this question about, again, a particular subset of high risk communities. And here we are talking of जो वृद्ध हैं, which are elderly people, and women. Because आप जानते हैं पैंडेमिक में क्या वैसे भी औरतों को और जो लड़कियां हैं उनको खाने में थोड़ी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन फेस करनी पड़ती है. ठीक से दूध नहीं मिलता, फैट नहीं मिलता, ये नहीं मिलता, कम खाना मिलता है, आखिर में खाना मिलता है. So we are looking at in this pandemic creating a kind of so how should we be focused on that? If you could very briefly comment on how we should be focused on nutrition, because we have a lot of questions. Nutrition for women and for the elderly population that we have in India, who actually at this time are the most susceptible, the elderly, to this pandemic.
Definitely. I think one of the things would definitely be kulit, which is horse gram. Again, it's a pulse, beautiful amino acids, lovely iron content, fiber, glycemic index is low, so it's not going to shoot blood sugar levels for people whose movement is restricted. Having that with a jawar bhakri and some flaxseed chutney on the side, which is traditionally made by Maharashtrians and South Indians. The South Indians make it with the leaves. It's called javas, and Maharashtrians make it with the seeds. Lovely omega-3 profile. This
Okay.
fatty acid profile, as well as the proteins coming from kulith and the jawar bhakri together. Jawar bhakri, vitamin B1, fiber, iron. All of these three things together. And what would really be golden would be adding some ghee if it's available and accessible. This makes a completely beautiful meal for anyone who's looking at upping their nutrient profile, especially in the elderly and the women population who may be affected and who want to do better.
I mean, I want to ask particularly in the context of North India. नॉर्थ इंडिया में जैसे आप जानते हैं बहुत बारी एक तो अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ फूड कम है और जैसे कि आपने सत्तू की बात की थी मेरे ख्याल से यू टॉक्ड अबाउट सत्तू यू टॉक्ड अबाउट समथिंग एल्स इफ यू कुड ब्रीफली फॉर अ मिनट टच ऑन दोस टू बिकॉज ये लोकली अवेलेबल फूड्स हैं जिनको हम भूल रहे हैं और इनका फायदा कैसे उठाया जाए ये बहुत जरूरी है हमारे लिए समझना.
Again, very non-perishable things. Onion chop, 1 spoon of sattu, salt, some chili powder, a glass of water, nimbu. Best drink. It's called the satua sharbat. Or you could, if possible, make small sattu laddus by adding some jaggery or misri along with some peanuts and some oil or ghee to it, and make it into small laddus, which would be really good even for pregnant and lactating women during this time. Mostly all those things are inexpensive except for quality of ghee, etc. is something that can be controlled at your end. I believe besides that, rajma chawal, which is a delicacy up north, along with a side of onion kachumbar, which has lime and rock salt, sindha namak. This entire combination of rajma, rice, and the onion is also lovely when it comes to giving you your B complex vitamins, boosting serotonin and endorphins in your body, taking care of nitrogen fixation, taking care of your immunity, lots of fiber, stable glycemic index in rajma, good quality protein, easily available. And the onions also take care of the digestibility score of rajma along with rice. So it takes care of your stomach, improves your good gut bacteria and the gut flora.
So अब मैं आपसे थोड़ा सा I want to talk to you a little bit about a few questions that have come to us. तो ये है importance of indigenous varieties of food grains. Does it create higher immunity? मतलब कि हमने काफी बात की लोकली, so ऐसे कोई 3-4 एक तो इंडिजिनस वैरायटीज जो हैं जिनको हम भूल रहे हैं आजकल लोकली प्रोड्यूस जो होती हैं उनका क्या हायर इम्यूनिटी है और ऐसे अगर आप 2 एग्जांपल्स दे दें हमें 2 डाइवर्स रीजन से तो आई थिंक दैट वुड बी वेरी नाइस इफ यू कुड गिव अस 2 एग्जांपल्स.
Right. I think from South India, I'd love to point out barnyard millet, which is savri or samak rice. It is one of those meals that cooks really fast, inexpensive. It can be paired with either or a combination of boiled potato, peanuts, coconut, any lentil, makhan, dahi, doodh to make a kheer out of it. So a combination or a standalone with any of these things that I mentioned. Barnyard millet or samak rice, samo rice. This is usually what people consume during the monsoons. And when we speak about indigenous varieties, I think it's very important to also take note that it needs to be seasonal. I think that's one of the things. The second, I'd love to say jawar. I think it's pan India, a lot more in the north. Jawar can be made into a bhakri. It can be turned into laddus. It can also be laid out as an amboli, which is a dosa. any of your ways of consuming jawar, simply because its iron content is good. It has stability because it has a good amount of fiber, and it takes care of cooling down your body. So, a country like India, which is mostly tropical, does not see too much of winter.
Mhm.
Definitely, jawar is something that keeps you.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple more questions that have come in. ये पूछ रहे हैं अब ये तो a perennial problem है. It has nothing to do with the pandemic. I think ये तो हर parent की problem है. वो कह रही हैं कि healthy खाना interesting कैसे बना दूँ अपने बच्चों के लिए. और दूसरी इससे ही जुड़ा एक सवाल है which is asking power food for kids brain development, because I think people are concerned that we are going to live with this pandemic for now 2 years or 4 years. That's what the WHO tells us. तो अब हमारी एक्सटर्नल मूवमेंट रिस्ट्रिक्ट हो गई है, खाने की सोर्सेज रिस्ट्रिक्ट हो गई हैं, हमारी इनकम रिस्ट्रिक्ट हो गई है. वी आर ऑल स्ट्रगलिंग विद लिमिटेशंस. सो हाउ डू वी मेक healthy food interesting, and what is the superfood in a sense for kids brain development? I want to go ahead and say not just kids but for superfood for anybody's mental uh, uh, activeness and sustainability, because we all need to be mentally active and ongoing with our work.
Thanks, Chapal. I on the very first point, I don't see eye to eye when it comes to this is a ragi biscuit and you should have it. No, you don't call it a ragi biscuit. You call it a ragi bhakri. You call it as it is. So the kid has acceptance and grows up that way. You have to make your kid know that this is chawal. The kid needs to know what is the regional or the local name for the food he or she is eating, so that in the future, when they have to identify what is really genetically compliant with them, they will need to know that, okay, this is something that my sabzi wala can pronounce, my local grocer can pronounce. This is what has a local or regional name. My mom or my dadi, nani, etc. have a name for it. So it should pass that test. And it's hence extremely important that the same variety that you may have gone through in your childhood is given to your children as well. We deprive our children of kheer, laddu, of any delicacies, which also includes fried maida, which is something like, say, for example, a namak pada. The minute you are going to fry anything that is maida, it lowers the rate at which sugars get released into your bloodstream. I think it's very important to understand that eating a handful of those diamond cut namak padas made at home in good quality groundnut oil is far superior than allowing your children to have a pizza which is also made out of a medeka base. But we don't really seem to bat an eyelid when our kid is having something that is maida based, whether it's a pizza, a pasta, or a biscuit that has stayed in a package for 6 months and it hasn't gone bad. So we don't question those things, but we're right here to question whenever it is about giving kheer, which has cane sugar, giving laddu, which has jaggery, or giving namak pada, which is fried with herbs and spices like salt, ajwain, jeera, which also show a really good effect on your body because of the delayed release of your blood sugar levels. I think it's very important that the minute you get in this diversity of delicacies, local, cultural, as well as occasional. If you are supposed to eat, pragri on a Holi, you should make that at home. If you are supposed to eat jalebi on a certain occasion, you are supposed to eat it. Your kid will never want to have any entertainment or fun out of food or have it any other interesting way if you are going to introduce this. Just because the blog is going to tell you oats is good and oats is healthy, your kid eats oats daily for breakfast. Of course, the kid is going to get bored. If you ask us, in our childhood, we've had poha one day, aloo paratha one day, idli one day, dosa one day, koki one day. We've had diversity. Why we were never bored. This diversity was taking care of it. So I really think it's very important that food doesn't need to go interesting. It's just that you need to go back to basics and follow exactly what your mom did with you, versus just sticking a diet chart on a fridge and be like, okay, oats one day, eggs one day, oats one day, eggs one day. It doesn't work that way.
Okay. Let me ask you now the last few questions, because we are in the last 10 minutes, and if anybody has any questions, please do ask us. हमसे सवाल पूछ लीजिए. हमारे पास दो सवाल हैं. One is about vegetable oils, how good they are for us. If you could briefly touch on that, because I want to ask another question, which is this constant split between carbohydrates and protein. बड़ी बातें होती हैं इस पे कि कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स हम ज़्यादा खाते हैं एज इंडियंस और प्रोटीन कम खाते हैं, और ये तो इन दोनों पे अगर आप छोटी सी बात हमें बताएं तो फिर आई कैन आल्सो टेक अ फ्यू मोर क्वेश्चंस. बताइए थोड़ा सा इसके बारे में, इफ यू कुड टेल अस.
Going to be brief. I think in oils, we should definitely resort to cold pressed groundnut oil, mustard oil, ghee, coconut oil. I would just go with these four. Even in our textbooks, we've learned, right? Oil comes out of dairy or seeds. So that's just what we should stick to. And also, please be recipe specific. If you're doing pohe, groundnut oil. If you're doing a stew and appam, coconut oil. If you're doing sarson ka saag, mustard oil. If you're doing roti or chawal, ghee. That's the phenomena to follow. The second question, yes.
Yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead. I was just going to bring it up. Yeah.
Yes, the second question, the carbohydrate and protein. We were a country always as evolution laborers. We just stopped doing that and we sat in front of laptops and we thought that it's better to just do proteins and fats in food and eliminate carbohydrates because they spike blood sugar levels and insulin, which starts giving us belly fat. But what people need to identify is that they have to move more, not be a laborer. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be sedentary, but you have to cut the sedentary nature of working. Try and get up every 30 minutes for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can continue eating your carbohydrate and protein in the same proportion as your grandparents did, which is technically the proportion of 3 is to 1. Whether you take a khichdi, it's 3 is to 1, rice to dal. Whether you take an idli or a dosa, it's 3 is to 1. Whether you see a South Indian having rice, they'll always make a small well in between and just add a ladle of sambar, 3 is to 1. This is simply because BCAAs are present in rice and the other 6 amino acids are present in the lentil, pulse, or the dal that you are going to be consuming. But the other 6 are already great in proportion. We have to bring up BCAAs, and hence having a more quantity of your rice or your roti is important than the amount of protein or the dal or the sambar that you are consuming.
So I want to also return to this question of food all over again, because we are about to come to the end of the program. And I want to ask you this question sort of in a different way as I started asking in the beginning of the program, which is, um, we've spoken a lot about nutrition. We've spoken a little bit about how people are not getting enough. लोगों के पास खाने को पूरी तरह नहीं है. But what is the impact of it on the mental health and the ability to, because all of us are now looking at the other person and saying, um, are we getting enough? They have so much and we have so little. And or how do we make ourselves secure? Food insecurity सी हो गई है हमारे आसपास. So how should we think about food at this time? If you could briefly say, I mean, should it be about quantity? Should it be about enough? Or should it be about nutrition? कैसे सोचें हम अपने खाने के बारे में? Because this is very important, right? Because India is primarily a country of poor and middle class people, right? So whether it's an avocado or a broccoli, हमारे लिए इन चीज़ों का कोई मतलब नहीं है. We are people who need nutrition at the end of the day. So आप कुछ बताइए इसके बारे में.
Thanks, Chapal. So I think हमने हमेशा खाने को various aspects में देखा है up till now. I think right now, finally, what I believe we need to see food as, and in general, what we should have done was as gratitude. So we were either guilt tripping or we were greedy, but we never took the G in moderation, the G in the in between, which is gratitude.
Yeah.
I think the minute you have gratitude that you have enough on your plate, that you can share the burden of malnourishment that the rest of the society is going through. The minute you understand that this is enough, even if the taste is good, I do not need to eat beyond a certain point. And even if this is all that I have, I can optimize it by just combining the right proportions and nutrients of food so that I can optimize better and receive more. Less is more is the concept right now. So even if it's less, it needs to be full of quality. It needs to be full of nutrients. And if you have more, then sharing with the other, underprivileged counterparts is extremely important. That burden needs to be spread over. I think gratitude would be my answer. Spreading and sharing the burden with the others less fortunate than us is important, and definitely optimizing more by keeping food fresh, keeping it simple, and going back to basics, combining them correctly in their traditional and cultural combinations is extremely important right now, so that it also gives us physical and mental satiety and makes us sleep well.
Hmm. I want to ask a question related to my comment, and then we'll close because we have barely 2 minutes left, and my producers will kill me for asking too many questions. But I'll still ask you this: food and empathy, right? सद्भावना और खाना, हमारा खाना, right? हम सब डरे हुए हैं. We are all scared. We don't know how this pandemic will play out. But what we do know that there are two things that are connecting humanity today, which you referred to in your earlier answer. One is our empathy towards other people, how we can help others. And the second is food, because that is the most fundamental need, right? Because until you have that food, you're susceptible to anything and everything, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Because there have been many movements across the cities: feed these workers, feed X workers, contribute to this cause, and we really need to locate ourselves as people who have enough food. How are we going to interact with this need for other people, in a sense?
Um, I think here with food and empathy, we already have, as evolution and tradition, the phenomena of langar, whereby um, food is distributed. There is harmony, there is peace, and there is my stomach is full if I see an XYZ person feeding well. And I really think that we have to go back to the place where we need to empathize and share the load, where if you come from a place where you have enough, it's important that you go the route of lumber, you go the route of sharing with the ones who cannot have enough right now or even adequate to further their generations. Because really speaking, we're indirectly looking out for ourselves yet, because only if you have the laborers who are going to take care of your infrastructure, who are going to build the India your children are going to see, you have to ensure that they're at their optimum nutrient levels, that they're not collapsing as an infrastructure, and that they're safe and they're secured. So definitely, I think sharing the load, langar, तुमने खाया हम हमारा पेट भरा needs to be the ideology.
I think that's a beautiful thought to close on. Thank you so much. I don't think we could have put it better. While we in cities are struggling with ideas of what to eat and whether this is nutritious or that is not nutritious, I think it's important to remember that a large part of India is going hungry, right? And it's time to remember your old tradition of actually sharing, and langar is a beautiful example of that. It's time to remember that if you have enough and you have excess, it's time to give a little to somebody else. अगर आपके पास है तो यही शायद सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट वक्त है जिसमें आपने दूसरों को कुछ देना है, और खाने से बड़ी चीज़ इस वक्त हम किसी को नहीं दे सकते, क्योंकि हेल्थ केयर और जो ज़रूरत हैं वो तो शायद गवर्नमेंट दे सकती है और खाना भी सरकार दे रही है, मगर भारत इतना बड़ा देश है, we are such a large country. This is the time we need to focus on things like this, and also remember something that you said, Raksha, which is that remember tradition and also remember traditional food systems. We are losing all those. Those are very, very critical. There are so many things that you mentioned today which are really critical. The low cost nutritional value of so many of the foods that you mentioned today that are really critical to helping millions of people who have very little and who need our help and support. So thank you, Raksha, for joining us. I really, really appreciated you taking time on a Sunday evening. And thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. We will continue this discussion on another critical issue and look forward to another critical conversation with you. Thank you and take care.
Thank you so much, Chapal.